And I will start.
Uh, you should have heard the message that recording is in progress.
Thank you, Karen. So welcome to Communicating to Different Generations. I'm excited to introduce your speaker today. He is a business strategist and executive coach named Julius Adewunmi. He is fondly referred to as the CEO Whisperer for his compassionate approach in guiding executive and trailblazer to explore new ways of thinking and facing challenges, both personally and professionally. A graduate of St. Louis University and an entrepreneur who owned multiple businesses in his 30 years as a St. Louis resident. Julius is passionate about empowering leaders. Julius is a Nigerian-born U.S. citizen who lived in Africa and Europe. Julius is an internationally certified John Maxwell speaker, trainer, and business executive coach. This CEO Whisperer has also served on the board of the YMCA for more than 10 years, coached youth soccer for nonprofit programs, and has served on various nonprofit committees. Please join me in welcoming Julius Adewunmi for Compelling Communications.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. Toastmasters, it's been a very long time. I wanted to first start off by thanking all you guys for being here today. And most especially, I wanted to thank West County 1905 for all their support, past and present members, because I'm here today doing what I do primarily because of the foundation that I received from Toastmasters. So thank you. I wanted to start off today by just asking the group, first of all, what does it mean to communicate? Because we talked about communication to generations, but what does it really mean to communicate? Communication is essentially just the exchange of ideas, right? It could be basically verbal and it could be nonverbal. But primarily, I think in our world today, we're focusing on the verbal communication. So as you guys all know, if you've heard me speak before, I get most of my inspiration from my family. And years ago, I was growling at my children. At the time, I think they were 12 and 8 and I think 4. And they were all on their laptops and iPads and phones. And it said, I said, guys, you guys need to get off your phones, man. You guys need to communicate with each other. And so my son sent me this skit here. Can you guys see this?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Basically, what it shows is it shows the current generation, I guess, on their phones and whatnot. And it basically shows the older generation reading newspapers. I think when you see this, you have to kind of put things into perspective and say, perhaps we shouldn't be so hard on our kids today with their fixation on their digital devices, because we, at some point in time, seem to have fixated as well with reading the newspapers. So that was kind of a funny skit that he sent to me that's very important today. So I thought today, let's just go through the generations. I wanted to start off, first of all, with the Industrial Revolution. And basically, in the Industrial Revolution, jobs were basically for survival. Everybody worked regardless of their hours, regardless of the conditions. And the boss was always right, and opportunities were scarce. Well, ask yourself, how was communication during this era? Well, communication during this era was primarily direct. I believe sometimes they say you only speak when you were spoken to. The audience, which is pretty important when you're speaking, was mostly homogeneous, the same kind of people you were speaking to. Very limited exchange. In other words, there wasn't really much exchange of ideas. You were being told what to do when you primarily did it. No negotiation. And I'm going to use an example of just being in a sales position. And I'm going to take this through the generations. And during this era, I would say that the sales position had very little phone access. You couldn't communicate by phone or use the phone. I remember back when I first came to the United States of America, and I would call home just to ask for money. It took me 2 hours sometimes to get a line to go through to speak to my parents. So I had to dedicate a certain amount of time to making that phone call to be able to ask for money. Anyway, when you think in terms of a salesperson making sales calls in this era, it was door to door and it was 100% engagement. In other words, for you to execute a contract, you had to be there in person to get the contract signed. Let's move to the information generation. The information generation is primarily the generation that I would say that I lived and I grew up in. And in this generation, you had the rise and the growth of IT companies. You had people that took jobs for standard of living. You know, that parents primarily took care of the survival, and they are now taking care of the standard of living. And there were no loyalty never existed and lack of options. And let me ask you this, how was communication during this era? I would say communication improved. Now there are increased numbers of different types of nationalities. So you now have a diverse audience, a diverse workforce that you're communicating to. There was some increased exchange of ideas and negotiation. You know, we began at this era, I think we began the concept of an open door policy. You can come in and suggest or make suggestions, and your suggestions would be considered. Whether they were or not, that's a different subject, but we began that era of just exchange of ideas and negotiation. And in this era, I actually began my career as a salesperson. And I remember that I had very little access to the telephone. Perhaps I could make a call to set appointments, and that was it. I had very little access to computers, and even the cell phones that we got access to back then, they weren't very smart. As you can see, I call them dumb phones back then. And door-to-door sales was primarily the way of making sales, and it was 100% engagement required to execute a contract. So you still, once again, had to be there in person to execute a contract, right? Then we move to the digital and the social revolution, where we are today. Today, the importance of what we do today lies in the quality of life, quality of workplace, quality of job, quality of role, quality of opportunity, and quite a bit of learning and rewards. Now, what does this mean? This means today that the people that we are communicating with are leading in this digital and social revolution, primarily the millennials and the Gen Zs. They are looking for a purpose. They are looking for appreciation. They are looking for more than what the prior eras took care of. The first one took care of survival. The second era took care primarily of standard of living. Now this generation is looking for meaning, looking for purpose, looking for the type of communication that's empathetic. And that's a key word as we move forward. Okay. In this era, communication improved. You have major intense diversity of audience and workforce. You have something today we call intersectionality, okay? And this is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of discrimination, oppression, and we must consider everything and anything that can marginalize any people, whether it's gender, race, class, sex, or sexual orientation, or physical ability. In this era, communication is you're fully engaged, increased exchange, you have ideas, and you can negotiate. And so I'm going to use this comparison again. I'm 58 years old. I have a son, an older son, who's now 28 or 29, I think. And I have a younger son who's 20. The 28, 29-year-old falls into the millennial. And the 20-year-old and the 19-year-old actually falls into the Gen Z. Now, my first son took a sales position as a millennial. And unlike me, I had to get out in my car and drive into towns in Missouri, go out, find out who I was supposed to be calling on, knock on those doors, introduce myself, go in, warm them up, and then make a presentation to make a sale. And of course, I had to be there to fully engage and execute the sale. My son takes a position in sales. He sits upstairs in his bedroom, never leaves the bedroom for 8 hours, makes phone calls on his computer and his cell phone, has the presentation right in front of him on his computer that he's able to regurgitate to his prospective buyers. And they have increased digital exchange where the contracts can now be executed without him ever face-to-face meeting his prospects. So we have come quite a bit to get to this phase to where we are now not necessarily requiring a face-to-face engagement. Now, there are obviously good things, I guess, good parts for this, but this is also leaves, I think it leaves Toastmasters an opportunity, because the further engaging that the millennials are in digital communication, okay, the more opportunity leaves for Toastmasters to cater for that face-to-face engagement that's sometimes required. And communication between one another becomes limited. Sometimes we're limited to emojis on our cell phones. I think it's important to fully engage when you're communicating. You know, the Meridian theory talks about how it's 7% verbal, 38% vocal, and 55% body language. So if you take out the biggest percentage of it, okay, we're now left with just the vocal in between communicating on the phone. And so I think it's very important, and it leaves Toastmasters a great opportunity to work with millennials. Now, I'm going to go one step further and go to my Gen Z, my youngest son. He wants absolutely no human contact. This is a kid, a young man, that when I say, hey, can you call Kohl's and see if they have this product on their shelves? He's going to go on Google and go on Kohl's. He's going to pull up the website and he's going to search the website without talking to anybody at Kohl's. He's going to come back to me and say, yes, Dad, they have it, but they don't have it at this particular Kohl's. They have it at this one down here. Now, I have to ask him again, did you call? And most likely he'll say no, because he didn't call. Well, the problem with not calling is perhaps the fact that without that direct engagement, okay, there is no commitment on the other person's side. When you physically engage with someone, now you're committing, you're having them commit to that communication. For example, if I make a door-to-door sales call, I have immediate commitment when I engage with them. If I send an email today, I'm relying on them to respond. If I send a text, I'm relying on them to respond. If I make a phone call, they're committed to responding because they have to answer the phone. Okay? Anybody have any questions thus far? No? Yes? Maybe?
I'm not seeing any in the chat, nor
Right.
any raised hands.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Julius, you said that you are committed simply because of a phone call. Now, when I was in sales, generally, they would say you would have to get 3 confirmations before a person would actually follow through with what they said. So how would one phone call commit a person to doing something?
Well, that's interesting. So let me go back to the slide here. So keep in mind what I'm talking about is communication, right? I'm talking about engagement and communication. So I'm not talking about fully executing the contract, right? I'm talking about the fact that if I send an email, I'll give you an example. If I send an email at 10 o'clock and I need something's done before noon, and you don't respond to me until afternoon, I can't get what I need done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I send a text, you were not committed, or an email, you were not committed to responding. But if I pick up the phone and I call you,
Mm-hmm.
and you answer the phone, you see, you're committed to talking to me and giving me a response. Otherwise, I am relying on when you see that text or see that email, and then you prioritizing it before you're responding to me. And so this is an experience, this is something I've experienced even in my workplace, because for the younger folks, the millennials, okay, they prefer emails, and they will send emails all morning long, okay, and waiting for you to respond. When you and I both know, if you pick up the phone and you make that phone call and you speak to that person, they are now committed to responding to you. Right?
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. Let me just put,
You're cutting off. Hello? Hello?
Lamont, we have
open house or whatever, and they don't show up,
I'm sorry.
although they told me.
I didn't hear your question.
Okay, my question is, when I'm marketing for Toastmasters and I speak directly to a person and ask them to attend a meeting, they say yes, but they don't show up.
Okay.
Generally, in order to get them there, I have to send out a couple of more contacts just to reconfirm the commitment. So
Okay.
how do I get, and this is for all Toastmasters, we all have the same problem. How do you actually get a person to attend a meeting on your invitation, even though they initially said they would?
Okay. So I'm sure that there are different ways. I'm sure there are organizations and other Toastmasters that have had this type of experience and have had success with it. But first question I would ask you is, who are you communicating with? Who are you making the invitation to? Is that somebody in his 40s, in his 50s, in his 30s, in his 20s? Who are you communicating with? That would be the first question. Hello? No.
Posing that question. So are you saying that it's a specific age group that would be more receptive?
Exactly. So my point to this whole presentation is we have to know our audience. We have to know our audience and know how to communicate with the audience that we are engaging. Okay. Today,
Okay.
if you set up an appointment with me, it has to go on my calendar. And once it's on my calendar, it's golden. I'm going to be there. All right. Now, for someone of a different age, I would just go to the millennials. Okay. You might have to follow up with a text. You might have to follow up with a couple of emails. And you might have to follow up with the reminder that, hey, Lamont, I'm looking forward to seeing you later on today at our engagement at 2 o'clock. You know, there might be different steps to follow up depending on the person that you're engaging. But either way, I think that the point I'm making is it opens up a lot of opportunities for Toastmasters, because primarily when you are looking at millennials and the Gen Zs, you're looking at incredibly talented young men and women. You're looking at incredibly open minded young men and women. And you're looking at an age where they have access to every and all type of communication and information that's available. And so you almost have to pick your poison. You have to pick the route in which you want to fully engage with them. But once again, you have to, it's got to be important to them as well. Right? It has to be important to them as well. So I'll go to an example of, say, you know, I said we as millennials, millennials primarily, they look at when things have to be fast, right? Because they feel like slow is bad. That's kind of the assumption that's made with millennials. Okay, convenience. If things aren't convenient, then it's difficult. Okay, going back to my son. You know, I had to go and look for a restaurant or fast food place, you know, during my day to have lunch and eat lunch. He comes downstairs, opens the door, because guess what? Uber Eats delivered his meal, picks up his meal and goes back upstairs and has lunch. The convenience of it, you know, things have to be entertaining. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the word boring. I'm bored. That job is boring. You know, it's not challenging. You know, I use the word entertainment here, but really it's supposed to be challenging. They want to be challenged. That concept of certainty. This area, things have to be uncertain for them. They want that experience. Okay? They're nurtured. Therefore, they feel that risk is bad. We say they're entitled. Okay? And they feel like labor of work is bad. Why? Because they have different avenues today, okay, that allows them and makes them to feel that way. Okay. As I talk about this, the main idea I think I would like for us to walk away with is that, you know, in every type of engagement that we have today, we have to know that our education, communication, and engagement must be agile. We have 3 different types of eras of people born in different eras, maybe even 4 in the workforce today. And we can't communicate with every single one of them the way that we might have been used to communicating. It's not a one size fits all. Okay, we know Paul Axel says in-person meetings provide a sense of intimacy, connection, and empathy that is difficult to replicate via video. We all know that. We've all seen that, having been through in-person meetings, then gone to Zoom and craved to come back to in-person and gone to hybrid. You know, I've attended a lot of conferences that would have 300 to 400 people normally at the conference. And because it was hybrid, there were 5,000 people on that conference, right? I mean, you like to believe that when people are in the comfort of their own homes, that they're more apt to log on and engage and be involved in a conference. And I'm going to go back to what I said initially about engagement. I think that in-person engagement has a certain element of commitment to it that's far greater than the hybrid or the Zoom meetings. And so I feel like there's an opportunity for Toastmasters. You know, as we've moved from person engagement to Zoom and now to hybrid, it's important to stress that the need for improved communication skills, especially in this digital and information age. I mean, you have to look at this generation that we're involved in right now. There is such a great opportunity for Toastmasters to engage because it is highly needed. It is highly needed. The face down mentality onto that digital device is also the face down mentality that they use to engage you when you're speaking to them. You have to literally teach eye contact. You have to literally teach eye contact. You have to literally teach speaking in full sentences. Okay, so I feel like our clubs today We need to first meet the members where they are. Meet them where they are. If you have these young men and women that are comfortable with being at home behind a screen, that's perfect. Meet them where they are. And then we use our mentoring programs to move them, allow them to grow in their communication with that comfort level behind the screen, and then slowly and gradually move them through engagement and growth to perhaps an in-person meeting. After all, most of us that have been in Toastmasters for years, we've seen different examples of people that show up to these meetings and are literally, I mean, don't say a word for a year or two. They attend the meetings, but don't participate and don't say a thing. And you bring up table topics and you ask them and they say, no, thanks. And then all of a sudden, as they see the encouragement, as they see the growth, they get to a point to where somebody in the club moves them to that comfort level where they do their icebreaker. And once they do the icebreaker, they have now gained that muscle to make that first step. And as you gain and develop that muscle for that first step, the icebreaker, you gain the muscle to move to the next step. So I feel like Toastmasters has a great opportunity with the ages that we are in today in communicating and bringing that level of I would say the growth that I have received from Toastmasters. I think that there's a great opportunity in bringing it to them, but we just have to know what's important to the ages today, the generation today. We have to understand that it's not a one size fits all. We have to understand that different things are important to these young men and women today. And so, like any other era, we have to know our audience, and we must make sure that our education, our communication, and our engagement is agile. Any questions?
Yes, Julius, you do have a question from Raul.
Thanks.
Wow.
Thank you, Karen. Hey, Julius, that's a great presentation. I just wanted to add a couple points because the topic that you have selected is exactly similar to a couple of presentations that we have done in our company.
Okay.
And there are some interesting facts about the peculiarities of each generation. And
Absolutely.
if you're okay, I'll just highlight a few so that it adds some more context to what we are discussing.
Absolutely.
So you are spot on when you said that we need to meet them where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being, say, for example, Gen X, they like to talk in short sound bites and keep brevity so that they are attentive. If we talk in long sentences, if we send long emails, they will definitely tune off.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is they would like to be asked for feedback. So if we just keep a monologue conversation,
Right.
they may not be interested.
Right.
Similar to that, millennials, as you rightly pointed out earlier, they are more visual communicators.
Mm-hmm.
So they like to communicate in visuals rather than long text.
Mm-hmm.
So they would absolutely hate if a speaker has a lot of text on his or her slides
Mm-hmm.
and does not have any depictive pictures.
Right.
Also, they like to be encouraged to explore new paths, career paths, and options.
Mm-hmm.
If they get stuck in one slot, they would hate that and they would definitely leave. Gen Zs, say, for example, they like diversity and inclusion a lot. They are active in that field, especially Gen Zs. And if we have a meeting or a conference, say, for example, fictitious one, where we have a lot of certain demographic only, then they may not be interested or they may not be engaged. They will just switch off. So there are some peculiarities of each generation. What I also wanted to point out, and this is some statistic that we have in that presentation, and not sure if it gels with what we discussed, but an interesting fact. So what we always think about Gen Z is that they like to communicate in digital form only. But what we have found out in our statistic or research is 83% of Gen Z employees prefer to engage with their managers in person, which when I read it for the first time, I couldn't believe it. I read it twice, thrice, because 82% of managers, on the other hand, they believe that Gen Z employees always prefer to communicate via IM. So that is a huge gap in probably our understanding based on our perception of what the other generations are preferring or thinking.
Right.
And similar to you, I have two daughters. One is a millennial, one is a Gen Z. And whenever we speak to them at home, it's a very interesting conversation. We have to have the right lingo. We have to have the right brevity and context. We have to use the right emojis or acronyms. It can be messy at times.
Right. Thanks, Raul. I would want to add to that, and I would ask you this. Why do you think the statistics shows that the statistics you just read out, why do you think that Gen Zs prefer or like to communicate directly with their managers?
So, and that's a great question, Julius. We have talked to some Gen Zs in our workplace, and we try to validate whether that is really the case. And they said they did not emphatically say yes, but they said yes, there is some truth in that. The
Right.
reason that they prefer that is because there is this perception, as I mentioned, that everybody thinks Gen Zs are digital beings, human beings.
Right.
But they would like to be treated as normal human beings. It's just the age characteristics, the preferences for diversity and other things, which are different. But that does not mean that they are human beings. So they would like to be treated as humans.
Right.
They would like to be treated as equals
Right.
rather than putting them in a bracket
Right.
and then saying, okay, you are Gen Z, let's
Right.
talk separately. When we say that, then people take a backseat and say, okay, you have a huge perception gap.
Right.
So they might close out for conversation.
Right. Yeah, what we have found in our research is that the reason they like that engagement is because it shows them that they matter.
Yeah.
It shows them that they matter.
Exactly.
You know, some of us that grew up in a different era, we can work and we have a goal to hit, and we hit that goal, and we don't have to engage with the boss. We just know we hit this milestone and we get a raise. So we hit this milestone and we get a promotion, and we're built that way, right? That's just the era that we grew up in. They like that engagement because even if it's once a week, you know, they like that engagement because it shows them that they matter. And today, their parents raised them with the utmost importance that they matter, and that they can freely share what's on their mind. Okay. And they're really important to society. And so when we take them into the workforce, we have to understand that's how we have to nurture them. True. And that's why I go back and I say, as Toastmasters, to grow the institution, to grow the clubs, we have to figure out a way of engagement through encouragement and nurturing and building that confidence up. Figure out a way to build that confidence up, because I'll tell you one thing, unlike my generation, they respond emphatically to compliments more than any other one I've ever been engaged with.
Right.
So
right.
I think a lot of that is our younger generation needs validation. They need to know that they're doing a good job. They like to hear that. That goes back to your entitlement, but just my opinion. So Raul, if you could please, we do have a question in the chat, to please share where your stats came from that you mentioned. If you could put that in the chat for everyone. We also had from Jennifer Krupp, who works at Washington University. The college students I work with are eager for in-person engagement. They like hybrid work, some solo time and some in-person time. Those are from the chat, and you do have a hand from Darren Broderick as well.
Okay.
Hello, I'm actually going to be on video for this one.
That's awesome.
So I almost want to say, adding on to what Rahul said, it was almost getting to the point of how exactly does the person want to be acknowledged or celebrated? I know at our workplace, they have taught us like there's really three ways. Some people want to be celebrated in front of everyone, like they want the credit. Others want to be celebrated only on like a one-on-one basis. And of course I forget the third one. But anyway, I just wanted to add that to our little conversation today.
So how does that, I guess what I would say to that is, how does that transpose to Toastmasters? How does Toastmasters celebrate in that manner? Or how can we celebrate in that manner?
Well, if you're asking me specifically, I know that the clubs, or at least I hope that most of the clubs celebrate when we have either personal milestones or achievements. And I know that there's also been a push to celebrate when people have either gotten to another level in their path or gotten their path or gotten their DTM. And I know that also the district, as a part of some of the communicates, and that there's also a celebration for whatever educational milestones we made on that level too. As for the one-on-one, I don't think our club does that, but if someone else does, I would be more than interested to hear.
And I think perhaps that's where the opportunity lies. I think I know we have the mentorship in Toastmasters. I'm not sure how active it is, but I think that's where the opportunity lies in Toastmasters, is to really engage in those mentors that can have those one-on-one meetings, keeping track of the education, tracking the educational pathways, etc. That way, that mentor is the one that's able to encourage and nurture the individuals to be in a position where they can celebrate the individual, like you said, how they want to be celebrated, with the understanding of how they want to be celebrated. Any other questions or comments or input? Thanks, Raul. That was pretty good.
There are no there's no questions in the chat.
No questions in the chat? Okay.
Wait a minute. So I did want to, I'm sorry, I just wanted to notice this from Meg Langland. She's just sharing. As president, I closed the meeting by asking if there were any communication kudos or learning experience while communicating from the previous week that members would like to share. So it sounds like she allows the members the opportunity to self-report.
To self-report. Huh. I wonder how does she do that? When she closes a meeting, is that a Toastmaster meeting or just in her workplace?
I can't speak for her, so I would ask Meg to please unmute and elaborate, please.
That'd be awesome.
Meg, would you like to share some more?
All right. So at the end of the meeting, at the end of the Toastmasters meeting, I just asked the members if there was any situation in the last week or situations where they gave a presentation or communicated in their work or personal setting, and how that went. So, for example, one member said that he met with his boss and he asked for a raise, and he felt that his communication skills had improved and that he actually got the raise. So, you know, or it can be in a meeting situation where somebody was training in their group at work and they felt they gave a good presentation during the training session. And then everybody claps.
Great. So this is what I I'm going to go back to this mentorship. The reason I feel it's really important is because we as executive coaches, we're now being deployed. A lot of coaches are being deployed into organizations. And we have found that the organizations that use coaches, that makes 15 minutes available every week, every 2 weeks, every month to their employees on every level have a higher and greater retention than not. So I would reach out to you, say, hey, Meg, how are you doing? What's Tuesday like? What time do you want to get together this week? And you would say, hey, sure, I only have about 30 minutes on this particular day. And we would get together and we would sit down and just chat. It doesn't have to be about work. They're ultimately ultra confidential and it doesn't leave us. And so you're able to chat with me about anything that comes up. It could be an irritable boss. It could be an irritable coworker. It could be a great boss or a great coworker. But we have found that in the younger generation, especially millennials and Gen Zs, that this type of engagement, there's a direct link towards appreciating them and telling them that they matter and that they're important. Because somebody up there has enough know-how to say, you know, I need you to engage these young men and these young women. And the whole purpose of the engagement is to find out where they are, how they're doing, and how to help them grow. And if you are engaged with anybody in any level of leadership where you're engaged in helping people grow, there's going to be great appreciation for that. And so retention increases with the younger folks with that, even with the older folks as well, that, you know, that we've encountered. But more and more organizations are going to that coaching program. And that's where I see that I believe that if you link that back to the Toastmasters mentors, you know, I keep saying it, but I know that Club 1905 West County, a few years back, we did have mentors, certain folks that would meet with you and sort of guide you and talk to you and figure out, you know, what's your next path? What do you want to do next? And sort of guide you through your education process. So I think that's pretty important. And I think that's where one of the areas that the opportunity lies for Toastmasters.
I want to make a few comments if there is no one else speaking. This is Farzana.
Hi, Farzana.
Hi. Based on my experience in Toastmasters in the last 12, 13 years, especially in District 8, we have a mentoring program at the club level. It depends on the culture of the club and how club cultivates it. When I look at my own journey and journeys of the other successful Toastmasters, they have had great mentors in their clubs. That's where they started from. And I can list a whole name of 10 mentors at least right over here. So I think that effort needs to be at the club level to utilize the mentorship program which is given and enhance it. Mm-hmm. Second point I want to make is that we are talking a lot about Gen Z and younger generations' need for validation. If you look at the psychology world, it is a basic human need to be recognized for what they have done. Just like the way people raise their children, and no matter what their work look like, they are always not criticizing it. Now, in older generation, there was this parenting style, which has become a social conformity, that children were not allowed to speak up or say what they need. And it has changed with these younger, newer generations because they have more knowledge, more accessibility, and they know what their rights are as a human being. So if we keep that in mind, that being recognized for something which they have done is important, that goes a long way in terms of keeping everyone engaged, not just younger generation, but even other age groups. The third and last point I want to make that in older days, and when I became member, there used to be ribbons which were given to members on completing each one of their speeches, and those were actually branded by Toastmasters International. And they were a great source of inspiration and aspiration, because people will keep them in their books, in their diaries, and will use them as bookmark and look at it and feel good about it. Those are very simple and basic steps, but maybe going back to simplicity and how it can be enhanced will help dissipate a lot. Those are my 3 points based on my experience in Toastmasters and dissipate. Thank you.
Great points, Farzana. Great points. I agree.
Julius, I want to give you a time check here. It's 3 minutes. 3 minutes left.
3 minutes left?
Correct.
Well, you know, it's just coincidental because my next slide, what is it? Basically emphasizes that we need to communicate. We need to also figure out, as we have the different cultural influxes in our organizations and in our clubs, we need to figure out how to empathetically communicate. And empathy, as we all know, is how to share and understand in one's feelings. And so with that, I will wish everybody all the best. Thanks for being here. And let's figure out a way to engage, communicate, and grow the clubs. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius. You did a wonderful job, and we really appreciate the time that you have given us today and you sharing your knowledge with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julius, that's a lot of help to me. Now I know that I'm a millennial, and now I know how to look for things and work things out in my life. So I appreciate the help, man. All right.
No problem. Thanks, Willie. Good seeing you.
Yeah, good seeing you as well. All right.